Welcome back to our concert database walkthrough talkthroughs. So today's lesson we're going to be talking about forms and the design specification that's been released recently by Pearson's in Unit 2, creating systems to manage information. Our objectives for this lesson or video are to discuss the need and end state for the steps that we're going to undertake. We're going to introduce the design specification form, which is the one you're going to have to fill out in the exam. And we're going to do form creation and design specification updates as we go. So, need an end state preview. So open up Moodle and you'll see at the bottom we are completing the 06 Forms and Design Docs tutorial. We have a starting file and an end state file. The starting file here is pretty much the end state that we've taken from the validation and value lists file. So if you've completed that tutorial successfully, you can then move straight on to using your current existing data file as your starting file for this tutorial. So let's have a look at the end state then. And this is what you're going to try and produce. So we've got one more object created here. There's no changes to anything else in the database. So we'll open up this in Design View. And what you have in front of you is a form which essentially has its own user interface. So we've removed the record cycle from the bottom here. Now we've got a band details title. We've got a little help prompt there. We've got a kind of like a band ID out of however many records there are. We've got the band name, the genre, and you'll note that the drop-down box from the input validation previously has carried over to the form. And we've also got these little tooltips here which will describe why you need them later. We've got the option to save a band, undo changes. So example, if I start messing about with that, press undo changes, it will revert it back to the previous thing. We can add a band. If we don't want to add a band, we can undo, well, you can start to add it and undo changes will take you out of it. So what we've got is all of our bands moving through the database. So you'll notice there's a little bit of a refresh error on this field here because it's an unbound field, so it's not based on any table. So it has to wait for the form to load in order to derive the value of it, which is 11 being the number of records in total. So we've got the footer, the header at the top there, we've got the main body of the form here, and then we've got the footer here. And if you just look at the resize of the document, you'll notice that the footer stays a fixed length away, height away from the bottom of the screen. And this is just to keep consistency. So from here, we're going to go into the design view, and essentially what we're going to be doing in the process of this tutorial is going through all the different fields, how to use unbound fields, create buttons, and most importantly, create the design specification. So come out of there and let's download the design specification. So what is the purpose of the design specification form? Well, if this was in the real world, you would want some kind of documentation that described your database and what all the different forms did, so that you can quickly reference which fields are bound, which fields are unbound. So let's have a look. So as we've just done, download the specification from Moodle and it'll open up as follows. Okay, so we've got a number of different forms here that you need to fill out for different objects. First is the form design spec, the query design spec, and the report design spec. Disregard these two at the moment because we're not going to go through those, we'll go through them later. So we're going to go through the design specification for this activity. Form name should be quite self-explanatory. It will be the object, it won't necessarily be the object, well, it will be the object name. The purpose of it will be, kind of like think of it from the point of view of who is your user and what are they going to try and achieve by filling out this form. The title of the form is the actual physical description of the form in the top of the header that we just looked at. Data input aids, this refers to all the red text that you've just seen on that form. So it's anything that provides the user with descriptive information about how to fill out the fields. Okay, bound fields and the tables they come from. So the taxonomy of this field will be table name dot field name. and all the bound fields are text boxes that are based upon table fields. Unbound fields. So the example that was given was the total number of records, which was a decount, looking through all the different IDs and coming up with the number of records field. So it's not based on a specific cell, so it's not bound to a record, any particular record. It is just a generated field. Disabled fields such as primary keys, so that the user cannot adjust the value of an auto number or delete them. Generated fields and formula. We haven't got anything in our form specifically that covers this criteria, but think of it as like a calculated value that will be generated for the user to read, or maybe the generated value will be inputted into the database. So in the instance of our database, perhaps if we had a ticket input form, you might have the base value of the ticket, and then you might have a VAT calculation where it adds 20% to the total value of the ticket. Command buttons, which are basically the buttons that allow you to navigate, save, delete, and add records, and any actions that the form might perform outside of any of the options above. So what we're going to do now is go step by step, form creation and specification updates as we go through. So navigate to Moodle and download your input forms starting file. Once downloaded, open it up. And our base point is we are going to go to Create, then over to Form Wizard. We're going to base our form not on a query, but on table band, and we're going to pull in all of our fields. We're going to press Next. Once that's done, we're going to choose a columnar layout, the word that I can never say, and you're going to call it FRM band, because we follow the naming conventions. Now we're going to open the form to view or enter information. So we've got the basic level of form. We haven't got any command buttons, and we've got this kind of like record scroller that allows us to cycle through records, which isn't very user friendly because it's kind of restricts your it's very small compared to 1080p desktops these days, and the new button isn't obvious to a amateur database user that is the new button. In addition to this, there's no name of the form band. The IDs here have been derived from the field. Actually, a point about this: where have these captions come from? If you go to the band table, you go in Design View, click on Band ID there. In here, you have caption. Now, caption will be reproduced on the form when this table gets used through the form creation wizard, and it's always good practice to incorporate a plain English caption in the caption box, because for example this field name is bname. Now if bname was put on a form, it might not necessarily be obvious to the user that you're asking for a band name. So to make it easier for the user as a data input aid, in the caption you change it to band name, so it's a full English version. Very similar to how you would cite validation text. So going back to the form then. Okay, so we need to do a number of changes to this form to bring it up to date. So we need to go into Design View. We need to change our form header to band. One of the things you'll find is that you have to move all the different kind of like cells, the different controls to make them big enough to accept your input. So let's give ourselves some additional real estate to work with. So we're going to bring our detail down, and then we're going to create an area of footer for the buttons to go in, and we're just going to pull these areas out to give us more room. So the first thing we need to do is to disable the band ID. So in order to do that, you click on the object, you go to Data and Enabled, and then change that to No. So it grays out the field. So if I right click and go to Form View, I can no longer input any data into that field. So let's go back to Design View, We don't need to make any changes to the band name or the band genre per se, but we want to add some data input fields, not input fields, we want to add some form labels to make it easier for the user to input data. So the first message at the top was, in plain English, this form allows the user to add, delete, and update band information. And because we want to make it even easier to for the user to pay attention to this, we're going to make it red. So we're going to select the form field label, go to format, and on the right there you've got this border, not border color, for color. Press a little dot 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 and then select red. You can drag this properties window out so that you can view everything as well. So we've got that there. Now save yourself some time, grab the control, copy it and paste it, and then just place it at the end of the band name. Now if it's a required field, it's important to actually tell your user that it is required. So put an asterisk and go required. Let's copy the field over again, and in the case of genre, put something useful. So it's required field, either choose from the list or enter your own genre. So once that's done, let's look into the form preview. Now we've got some data input aids. So let's go back to our specification then. Well, the form name is FRM band. Purpose is just as the description, allows the user to add, edit, delete bands. The title was band form. Data input aids were general form description in header, required fields highlighted using labels, and the band genre combo box was said to be optional in terms of its value, but the user may use a value from the drop-down box. Okay, so bound fields and tables in which they come from. So if you Alt-Tab back to here and go into Design View, we haven't got many fields, so it's going to make life a lot easier. So we've got the band ID, band name, and band genre, and they are all from the table band. So we go back, and using square brackets, table band, don't forget your caps. So table.band .band_id as text band. The next one is table band dot Okay, so note that I'm referencing field names that I haven't really specified yet, so we will have to reproduce these field names in the table. So let's go back again, and the way you do that is you click on here, and what you've got, if you click all, you end up with the name of that field, and you also end up with the name of the label. So it's a text field, so we're going to call it txt band ID, and then we're also going to rename the label, so LBL band ID. Move down to the next one. We're going to rename that as txt band name and label band name. Genre, same story, txt b genre, and the label LBL b genre. Okay, so we've saved ourselves some hassle there. Go back to the specification, we've done the bound fields and where they come from. So, unbound fields, and what we wanted to do was to create a field here that was unbound to the database. So I'm going to take these two fields, and I'm going to copy them and I'm going to paste them. Because what that does is it saves me a little bit of time when I want to format stuff. So we're going to create this field here, and in the original sheet, or the original form design, we had band ID, one of however many bands there were. So in this instance, we're just going to create an of field out of the label. Now, if you want to move this text box relative to that, and I try to move it like that, both objects will move. So if I want to move it independently, you have to select this grey box. And if you want it to snap to an axis, if you hold shift, well, you can't hold shift down, but you can, it's very easy just to, follow the path to where you need to put it. Okay, so it's bound at the moment, and it's also been given a default name. So we're going to call this text max, because it's max number of records, and we'll call the label max as well. Okay, so how do we change the value of this unbound field? So the source is the control source there, and if we go into it, we come into the expression builder. Now, for this specific example, we're going to use a expression called decount. So I'm going to type decount, and I'm going to look for all records in my band table, or TBL band, and then close, and then press OK. So once that's done, I can now go into form view, and it shows me 11 records. Now if I use this left and right, the unbound field will stay as it is. So how do I put that into my design specification? Well, go back to form, unbound field is txt max, and my function is equals decount, open brackets, speech mark star, so it's wildcard, look for everything in the table band, and close. So disabled fields, we've got our txt band ID, and we've also got our txt max. Generated fields and formula, well, again, we're still talking about the txt max, so potentially you can just copy that over. Command buttons, we will have btn first band, btn prev band, btn next band, btn last band. We're also going to have btn save, or band save, btn band undo, and btn band add. Okay, so the actions here refer to what these buttons do. So my first one is takes user to first record, of band form. Now these descriptions are going to get quite long, and the justification of this formatting is justified, so take that over to there. On this table, take it over to there as well, and you can put one of these on each line if it makes it easier. So takes the user to the first record of the band form, takes the user to the previous record, takes user to the next record, saves the current record, undoes, is that a word? All the changes made to the current record, and then finally sets a blank form for the user to add a new record. Okay, so that's it. That's all you need to do for specification for each form. So save that as an example. And we'll go back into the main form and get this job done. Okay, so let's create some buttons and get the button tool there, and we're going to go for a save button. And this is really just a case of going through the wizard and choosing the right form operations. So it's a record operation and it's save record. Try not to use these pictures because they're not really common pictures for the user to use, and try and use the text. So instead of save record, just put save band. So I want to make it user friendly. And remember to name it button band save. Okay, once you've done it, it's pretty much working. There's not really anything to do with it. So just make sure it, aesthetically it lines up to the grid system. Better to have bigger buttons because the previous option will be huge. So the next one was an undo button. So it's a record operation and it's an undo button. And you're going to call it undo changes. And then call it btn band undo. Unfortunately, I have to resize it after it creates it. And the next one is your add new record. So record operations, add new record. And then we're going to go add band, go next, and then call it btn band add. Finish. And then again, work on the aesthetics to get the form up to scratch. So there we go. So let's have a look at this and see what it does. So go to form view, and if I change enter Sakari and press undo, it reverts the changes. If I, say for example, navigate to, let's say, Stormzy, and we change the genre from hip hop to grime, and then press undo, it changes it back. So let's change it again to grime, and then save band. If we go back one and then forward again back to Stormzy, then his genre is changed to grime. So if we click add band, we can then create a new band, and then again choose the correct genre and then press save. So if we go back and forward, no, we've done gets twice, so we'll do lethal bizzle. Whoa, not sure what's going on there. There we go, and we've got lethal bizzle in there. Okay, so next, go back into design I'm going to create our previous, next, and last buttons. So these are really straightforward, really. They're just like the original controls. So it's record navigation this time, so we're going to go to the first record, next. The first record. And I'm going to call it the first band, next. And then btn band first. Finish. Okay, so already you're starting to see the changes occur. Now, creation of the rest of the buttons should be quite self-explanatory in terms of the video. So you just go through the same motions, calling the buttons the correct names for them. So I'll leave that to you to do. The only thing left to do is to disable the controls at the bottom for the user interface. So if we go into Design View, so once you're in Design View, okay, so at this point now you need to get rid of the navigation buttons. So you go into the property sheet, you select the form, and then where it says navigation buttons there, you change that from yes to no. And once you've done that, you go into form view, and the navigation buttons will be disabled. And by this point you would have created your other first band, previous band, next band, and last band. Quite a long tutorial today though. So let's recap. We've discussed the need and end state. The reason why we need to do this is obviously to complete the task and pass the exam. We've introduced the design specification form, which will allow you to import the required evidence for the examination. And we've gone through the process of form creation and design specification updates. And thus ends the tutorial. Thanks very much.